My name is Sasha. I am 32 years old and I am an archivist. I spend my days in the basement of a museum preserving history, breathing in the scent of dust and old paper. My family calls me the mole because I prefer the quiet of the underground to the spotlight they crave. Growing up in the shadow of my father Byron and my younger sister Chantel was a lesson in invisibility. Byron is the director of human resources for OmniCorp, a massive conglomerate. He is a man who has spent his entire life running away from his roots, scrubbing away any trace of struggle until he shined like a new coin. Chantel followed in his footsteps, becoming an influencer who curates a life of beige luxury and high-end vacations. And then there was me. The disappointment. The girl who married a high school history teacher and was happy with a backyard wedding. That Sunday was supposed to be my day. My husband David and I had rented a small garden venue. We strung up lights ourselves and hired a local food truck. It was imperfect, humid, and loud, but it was ours. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon. At 4:45, the gravel of the driveway crunched under the weight of a silver Bentley Bentayga. The conversation stopped. The music died down. My father had arrived nearly an hour late, treating my wedding like a board meeting he could drop into whenever he pleased. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his cufflinks. He was not wearing the tuxedo I had requested. He was wearing a navy Italian suit that probably cost more than my entire wedding budget. Chantel spilled out of the back seat, holding her phone up, already recording for her followers. Hunter, her husband, and a hedge fund manager who looked at everyone like they were a bad investment followed them. They walked toward the reception area, not with apologies but with an air of annoyance. I walked over to greet them, trying to keep the smile on my face. "Dad," I said, "I am glad you made it." Byron looked around the garden. He looked at the plastic folding chairs we had rented. He looked at the paper napkins. He looked at my husband's family who were laughing and eating barbecue. His lip curled upward in genuine disgust. "Sasha," he said loud enough for half the guests to hear. "You expect me to sit on that plastic chair? It will ruin the silk of my trousers." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "It is a wedding, Dad," I whispered. "Everyone is sitting on them." Byron sighed a long, theatrical exhale. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and dusted the seat before hovering over it, refusing to fully sit down. Hunter leaned over to Chantel and whispered something that made her giggle. I caught the words "low budget" and "charming" in a sarcastic tone. They were not there to celebrate me. They were there to endure me. I returned to the head table, my hands shaking. David squeezed my hand under the tablecloth. "Ignore them," he whispered. "Look who is here." I looked up to see the one person whose opinion actually mattered, my grandfather Joe. Uncle Marcus was wheeling him down the aisle. Grandpa Joe was 89 years old. His mind was fading, a condition the doctors called early-stage dementia, but my father called an embarrassment. Byron had been trying to put Grandpa in a home for years, but Grandpa refused to sign the papers. Grandpa Joe looked small in his wheelchair, but his eyes were bright today. He was clutching something tightly in his trembling hands. It was a small rectangular object wrapped in newspaper that was so old it was brittle. I knelt beside his wheelchair. "Hey, Grandpa," I said softly. "You look handsome." He smiled, a toothless, genuine smile that warmed the coldness my father had brought into the garden. "Sasha." He wheezed, his voice sounding like dry leaves. "I have something for you. Not much, but it is everything I have left." He held out the bundle. I reached for it, treating it with the reverence I gave the ancient manuscripts at work. But before my fingers could graze the paper, a hand snatched it away. It was Byron. He had walked over his patients, evidently exhausted. "Let me see that, Dad," Byron barked. "We do not need you handing out trash to the guests." Byron ripped the newspaper open. It tore easily, fluttering to the ground. I saw the date on a fragment of the paper. 1952. Under the wrapping was a small gray booklet. It was covered in mold spots, the edges frayed and soft from humidity. It smelled of mildew and time. It was a bank passbook, the kind they stopped using decades ago. Byron flipped it open, squinting at the faded ink. What is this? Byron laughed, his booming voice drawing the attention of the entire party. A savings account from the Stone Age. He read the last entry. Balance, $50. Date, October 14th, 1962. The guests went silent. Chantel zoomed her phone in, capturing the moment. Hunter let out a sharp, barking laugh. $50, Hunter mocked. That will not even cover the cost of the ice for the drinks, Sasha. My father shook his head, looking at Grandpa Joe with pity that barely masked his contempt. You are losing it, old man, Byron said. You interrupt my schedule to give her $50 in a book that is probably filled with black mold. This is an insult. It is unhygienic. Grandpa Joe tried to speak, his hand reaching out. No, he rasped. No, Byron. Read the code. Read the code. But Byron was not listening. He never listened. To him, anything old was useless. Anything that did not glitter was garbage. Trash belongs with trash, Byron declared. He turned and dropped the passbook into the large metal bin behind him. The bin was overflowing with the remains of the cocktail hour. Shrimp shells, half-eaten lemons, and cocktail sauce. The book landed with a wet thud, sinking into the mess. The silence in the garden was absolute. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with sorrow, but with a sudden cold clarity. I looked at my father. He looked satisfied, dusting his hands as if he had just taken out the garbage. Then Hunter stepped forward. He looked at me, seeing the shock on my face, and decided to twist the knife. He kicked the metal bin. It screeched across the concrete patio, sliding until it stopped right in front of my white satin shoes. There is your inheritance, Sasha, Hunter sneered. Maybe you can use that $50 to rent a better tent next time. Chantel laughed, a high, nervous sound. Oh, stop it, Hunter, she said, though she did not stop recording. You are going to make her cry. But I did not cry. That is the thing about being an archivist. We know that the most valuable things often look like debris to the untrained eye. We know that history is written in the margins, in the things people throw away. I looked at Grandpa Joe. He was slumped in his chair, a single tear tracking through the deep lines of his face. He looked defeated. He looked like he had failed. I gently let go of David's hand. I stood up straight, smoothing the front of my dress. I did not look at Byron. I did not look at Hunter. I bent down. The smell of the trash was pungent, sharp with seafood and heat. I reached into the bin. My hand brushed against the cold, slimy shells until my fingers found the rough texture of the passbook covers. I pulled it out. Cocktail sauce dripped from the corner, staining the gray cover red. I took a napkin from the table and methodically wiped it clean. I did not rush. I let them watch. I let them see me holding the trash they despised. When it was dry, I slipped it into the bodice of my dress, right against my heart. I stood up and turned to my father. Get out, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was steady. Byron blinked as if a piece of furniture had just spoken to him. Excuse me, he asked. I pointed to the gate. Get out of my wedding. Take your Bentley. Take your influencer daughter. Take your hedge fund son-in-law. And leave, now. Byron laughed, looking around for support, but nobody was smiling. My husband's family had stood up, crossing their arms. My friends were glaring. You are kicking me out, Byron scoffed. I am the only person of status here, Sasha. Without me, this is just a picnic. Then go, I said. Go, be important somewhere else. Byron adjusted his jacket, his face turning a dark shade of violet. Fine, he spat. Have it your way. Enjoy your $50, Sasha. Do not come crawling to me when you need rent money. Come on, Chantel. Hunter. We are leaving. This place smells like poverty. They swept out of the garden with a flurry of noise and exhaust fumes. When the Bentley finally disappeared down the road, the tension broke. The music started again, but the party had changed. I walked over to Grandpa Joe and kissed his forehead. It is okay, I whispered to him. I have it. I kept it. Grandpa Joe looked up at me, his eyes suddenly lucid, sharp as glass. Do not let them take it, Sasha. he whispered, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. The code, OMNI Genesis 003. Go to the bank. Do not let them take it. I promised him I would. That night while David slept, I sat at our kitchen table with a bottle of rubbing alcohol and cotton swabs. I cleaned the passbook inch by inch. The cover was worn, the pages stiff. I opened it to the first page. There it was, just as Grandpa had said. Written in faded purple fountain pen ink, right next to the account number, was a sequence of letters and numbers that meant nothing to me yet. OmniGen 003. I stared at the entry. $50. It seemed so small, so insignificant. But Grandpa Joe was not a man of practical jokes. He was a man who had survived Jim Crow, who had built a life from nothing before his mind began to betray him. He had been desperate for me to have this. I decided then and there. I would take the day off work tomorrow. I would go to the main branch of OmniCorp Bank downtown. The irony was not lost on me. My father worked at the corporate headquarters of the parent company, but he probably had not set foot in a retail bank branch in 20 years. I would walk in with my trash and see what it was worth. The next morning, the city was sweltering. I took the bus downtown because my car was making a rattling noise I could not afford to fix. I clutched my purse against my chest. The passbook was inside, wrapped in a clean linen handkerchief. I stood in front of the OmniCorp tower. It was a monolith of glass and steel piercing the sky. This was my father's kingdom, a place of power, money, and exclusion. I walked through the revolving doors. The air conditioning hit me like a wall of ice. The lobby was silent, smelling of expensive sanitizer and money. Men in suits walked briskly, talking into earpieces. I felt small in my cardigan and flats. I approached the reception desk, but before I could even speak, a security guard stepped in my path. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his eyes scanning my outfit. "Deliveries are around the back." "I am not a delivery driver," I said, raising my chin. "I am a customer. I need to see a teller." He hesitated, looking me up and down one more time before pointing to the far corner. "General inquiries are over there. The line is long." I stood in line for 40 minutes. While I waited, I saw a familiar face. It was Hunter. He was walking across the mezzanine level, laughing with two other men in suits. They were heading toward the VIP elevator. He looked down and saw me. For a second, our eyes locked. He smirked, shook his head, and said something to his colleagues. They looked down at me and laughed. I could practically hear the text message he was sending to Chantel. "Your sister is begging for a loan." When I finally reached the counter, the teller was a young woman with long acrylic nails and a bored expression. She popped her gum. "Help you?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. I pulled the handkerchief from my bag and unwrapped the passbook. I slid it under the glass partition. "I would like to check the status of this account, please." The teller looked at the gray mold-stained book. She wrinkled her nose. "What is this?" she asked. "We do not use these anymore. This looks like it came out of a dumpster." "It did," I said, "but I need you to check it. Please." She sighed loud and annoyed, mirroring my father's sigh from the day before. She picked it up with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. She typed the account number into her computer. Nothing. She typed it again. "Listen, miss," she said. "This account does not exist. It is probably purged from the system decades ago. Like I said, it is trash. Please," I insisted, remembering Grandpa's urgency. "Try the code. There is a code written next to the number. OMNI-GEN-003. The teller rolled her eyes. "Codes do not work like that. But fine, if it will get you to leave." She typed in the sequence, OMNIGEN-003. She hit enter with a forceful tap of her acrylic nail. Suddenly, the silent, sterile bank erupted in noise. A red light on the teller's station began to flash. A siren, low and rhythmic, started whooping from the computer speakers. The teller jumped back, dropping the passbook. Her screen had turned a bright, alarming crimson red. "What did you do?" she shrieked. "You broke my computer! "Security!" she yelled. "Security!" Two guards started running toward me. My heart hammered in my throat. I grabbed the edge of the counter. I had not done anything wrong. I was just checking a balance. But then the text on her screen stopped flashing and settled into a solid, bold warning message. The teller gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at me, and for the first time she really saw me. Her face went pale, draining of all color. "What does it say?" I asked, my voice trembling. She did not answer. She looked at the guards who were reaching for my arms. "Stop!" she screamed at them. "Do not touch her." The guards froze. The teller turned the screen slightly so she could read it better. Her voice was a whisper, shaking with fear. "It says, Level 9 clearance. Identity verified. Founding member protocol." "Founding member," I whispered. Before I could ask another question, the elevator doors at the back of the lobby opened. A man in a gray suit ran out. He was not walking. He was sprinting. It was the branch manager. I recognized him from his photo on the wall. He looked terrified. He ran straight to my window, shoving the guards aside. He looked at the passbook on the counter, then at me. He was panting. "Ma'am," he said, sweat beading on his forehead. "Please, step away from the general counter. Come with me. Immediately." "Am I in trouble?" I asked. "Trouble?" He laughed, a nervous, hysterical sound. "No, ma'am. You are not in trouble. But we are. Please. The vault is this way." As I followed him past the gawking line of customers, past the stunned teller, and toward the heavy oak doors of the private offices, I realized Grandpa Joe was right. This was not trash. This was a bomb. And I had just lit the fuse. The silence that followed my demand for my father to leave was heavy, pressing down on the garden like a physical weight. Byron stood there for a moment, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson that clashed with his pristine collar. He looked at the gate, then back at me, smoothing his jacket with an aggressive, jerky motion. He let out a sharp, derisive breath through his nose. "Fine," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are actually doing me a favor, Sasha. I have a dinner reservation at a place that does not serve food on paper plates. Come on, Chantel. Let us go before we catch something." Chantel stopped recording just long enough to shoot me a pitying look, the kind she usually reserved for stray animals. She tucked her phone into her designer bag and trotted after our father, her heels clicking on the pavement. Hunter lingered for a second longer. He looked at the trash can he had kicked, then at me, a smirk playing on his lips. "Enjoy your treasure," he said softly, before turning his back and walking away without looking back. As the taillights of the Bentley faded into the distance, the tension in the garden did not simply vanish. It lingered. My guests, the people who loved David and me, were trying their best to pretend nothing had happened. The DJ, a friend from college, awkwardly faded the music back up. People returned to their conversations, but the volume was lower. The laughter was hesitant. I could feel their eyes on me. They were not judging me, I knew that. They were pitying me. And in that moment, pity felt almost as heavy as disdain. David walked over and wrapped his arms around me. He smelled like cedar and comfort. "I am so sorry, Sasha," he whispered into my hair. "We should not have invited them. It is okay." I lied, my voice steady even though my hands were trembling. I pulled away gently. I needed a moment. I needed to check on Grandpa Joe. Uncle Marcus was already wheeling Grandpa toward the exit. The excitement and the confrontation had exhausted the old man. His head was lolling forward, his chin resting on his chest. I walked over and knelt beside the chair one last time. "Grandpa," I said softly. He opened his eyes. They were cloudy again, the moment of clarity from earlier fading back into the fog of his condition. But when he saw me, he reached out and patted the front of my dress, right where the dirty passbook was tucked against my skin. "Keep it safe, girl," he mumbled, his voice barely audible over the music. "Do not let appearances deceive you. Trash is only trash if you do not know what you are looking at." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. I promise, Grandpa, I will keep it safe. Uncle Marcus gave me a sad smile. I will take him home, Sasha. You try to enjoy the rest of your night. You look beautiful. Do not let Byron steal your joy. But joy is a fragile thing. For the rest of the reception, I smiled for the cameras. I danced with my husband. I ate the cake. But I was not really there. I was hyper-aware of the cold, damp rectangle pressing against my chest. The cocktail sauce was seeping through the napkin I had wrapped it in, staining my bra sticky and uncomfortable. It felt like a brand. A physical reminder of my place in my father's world. To him, I was the daughter who treasured garbage. By the time we got back to our apartment, it was past midnight. Our apartment was small, a third-floor walk-up with creaky floors and drafty windows. It was nothing like the sprawling estate I grew up in, or the glass and steel condo Chantel lived in, but it was ours. Tonight, however, it felt smaller than usual. The walls felt like they were closing in. David was exhausted. He kissed me on the cheek and went straight to the bedroom, collapsing onto the bed, still wearing his dress shirt. I told him I would be there in a minute. I needed to get the stain out of my dress before it set. That was another lie. I went into the kitchen and turned on the small light above the stove. It cast a yellow, dim glow over the countertop. I reached into my dress and pulled out the bundle. The napkin was ruined, soaked through with red sauce and grime. I peeled it away, revealing the gray, moldy cover of the passbook. It looked pathetic. It was swollen from humidity, the edges fraying. It smelled of old shrimp and mildew. I grabbed a bottle of rubbing alcohol and a bag of cotton balls from the bathroom cabinet. I sat down at the small kitchen table, the silence of the apartment amplified by the humming of the refrigerator. I felt like a surgeon preparing for an operation, or maybe an archaeologist cleaning a fossil. I dipped a cotton ball into the alcohol and began to wipe the cover. Gently, circular motions. I started at the corner, wiping away the sticky residue of the cocktail sauce. The cotton ball turned brown and red. I discarded it and took another. Why was I doing this? Part of me wanted to throw it away. Maybe Byron was right. Maybe I was just holding on to the past because I had no future. Maybe this was just the delusion of a senile old man and a desperate daughter. $50. That is what Byron had read. $50 in 1962. Even with inflation, what would that be? $500? Maybe $1,000. It was not life-changing money. It was barely car repair money. But then I remembered Grandpa's eyes, the intensity, the fear that Byron would take it. Grandpa Joe had been a man of few words, but he was never a fool. He had worked as a janitor for 40 years, or at least that is what the family story was. But I remembered him reading the Wall Street Journal in the break room. I remembered him teaching me how to count by using stacks of coins. I kept cleaning. The alcohol fumes stung my nose, cutting through the smell of garbage. I opened the book. The pages were stiff, stuck together by time and moisture. I used a pair of tweezers to separate them, holding my breath so I would not tear the paper. Page 1. Name: Joseph Williams. Account number: 8842. Page 2. A list of small deposits: $5, $2, $10. Page 3. The final entry, October 14th, 1962. Balance, $50. I stared at it. It was exactly as Byron had said. I felt a wave of crushing disappointment. I had kicked my father out of my wedding for $50. I had burned a bridge for a book of moldy paper. I put my head in my hands, ready to cry. Then I looked again. The light from the stove hit the page at a specific angle. There was something else there, not in the main columns but in the margin. It was written in a different ink, a deep, shimmering purple ink that had faded but not disappeared. It was handwriting I recognized. It was Grandpa Joe's handwriting, but from when he was younger, stronger. The loops were sharp, the pressure heavy. It was a code. I leaned in closer, squinting. I traced the letters with the tip of my pinky finger, afraid to smudge them. Code OMNI-GENESIS-003 Omnigenesis 003. My heart skipped a beat. Omni, that was the name of the bank. OmniCorp. But what was Genesis? And why 003? I sat back in my chair, the wooden legs scraping against the linoleum floor. Genesis meant beginning, origin, creation, and 003. Did that mean account number 3? That was impossible. OmniCorp was a global giant. They had millions of accounts. Account number 3 would mean... I closed my eyes and the memory of the afternoon washed over me. Grandpa's whisper, "Don't let appearances deceive you." He knew. He knew Byron would see a dirty book and see trash. He knew Hunter would see $50 and laugh. He knew Chantel would see something ugly and turn away. Grandpa had hidden something in plain sight, counting on their arrogance to keep it safe. He was counting on them being too snobbish to look closer. But he knew I would look. He knew I would clean it. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty window. This was not a savings account. This was something else. This was a secret that had been buried for over half a century. I looked at the clock on the microwave. It was 2 a.m. I had work at 8. I had a stack of archives to catalog at the museum. I needed the money. I needed to pay for the wedding expenses. But I knew I was not going to work tomorrow. I reached for my phone and opened my calendar. I deleted my shift. I did not care if I got written up. I did not care if I got fired. I had to know. I looked at the passbook one more time. The gray cover seemed to pulse under the yellow light. It did not look like trash anymore. It looked like a key. "I am going to the tower," I whispered to the empty kitchen. OmniCorp Tower. The building where my father had his corner office on the 45th floor. The building where Hunter visited to make deals. The building I was never invited to because I was not corporate material. I was going to walk into the lobby with my thrift store shoes and my moldy book. I packed the passbook into a Ziploc bag to protect it from any more moisture. I wrapped that bag in a clean silk scarf. I placed it in the bottom of my purse. I went into the bedroom and lay down next to David. I stared at the ceiling, watching the shadows of passing cars move across the plaster. I could not sleep. My blood was humming with adrenaline. I had spent my entire life feeling small, feeling like the footnote in my family's biography, the disappointment, the one who settled. Tomorrow I was going to rewrite the story. I did not know what I would find at the bank. Maybe the teller would laugh at me. Maybe security would throw me out. Maybe it really was just a senile old man's doodles. But deep down in the gut instinct that had made me a good archivist, I knew better. History is never just what is written on the surface. The truth is always in the margins. And tomorrow, I was going to read the fine print. The OmniCorp Tower rose out of the pavement like a middle finger to the rest of the neighborhood. It was 50 stories of blue glass and aggressive steel, reflecting the harsh morning sun in a way that blinded you if you looked up for too long. My father Byron worked on the 45th floor. He called this building the Cathedral of Commerce. Standing at the bottom of the steps, clutching my purse against my chest, I felt like a sinner coming to beg at the gates of a god who had already forsaken me. I checked my reflection in the polished brass of the revolving doors. It was a mistake. The woman staring back did not belong here. I was wearing my best work cardigan, a beige knit that had started to pill at the elbows, and a pair of sensible flat shoes that I used for long days standing on the concrete floors of the museum archives. My hair was pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense bun. In my world, I looked professional. Here, against the backdrop of bespoke Italian suits and designer briefcases, I looked like the help. I looked exactly like what my family said I was. A disappointment. I took a deep breath, trying to inhale courage, but all I inhaled was exhaust fumes and the metallic scent of money. I stepped toward the entrance. Immediately, a shadow blocked my path. "Excuse me, miss." I stopped. A security guard, a man whose neck was wider than my head, stood with his arm extended. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at my shoes. Then he looked at my bag. "Deliveries are around the back," he said, his voice flat and bored. "The freight elevator is the second door on the left." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, a familiar mix of shame and anger. It was the same look my father gave me. The assumption that my presence could only be transactional and low-level transactional at that. "I am not a delivery driver," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my knees. "I am a customer. I need to speak to a teller." The guard finally looked at my face. He squinted, reevaluating the threat level of a woman in a beige cardigan. He lowered his arm slowly, but he did not step aside. He pointed a thick finger toward the far corner of the lobby. "General banking is over there. Do not loiter in the atrium. That is for corporate clients only." I nodded and pushed past him. The inside of the lobby was freezing. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that suggested the people who worked here did not generate their own body heat. It smelled of expensive sanitizer and cold brew coffee. The floor was white marble, so polished it looked like water. My rubber-soled shoes squeaked with every step, announcing my arrival like a clown horn. I tried to make myself small, hugging the wall as I walked toward the general banking line. To my right was the atrium, a roped-off area with plush leather sofas and a private espresso bar. This was the VIP section, the place where deals were made, the place where my family belonged. And then I saw him. Hunter, my brother-in-law. He was standing by the espresso bar, looking effortlessly expensive in a charcoal suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. He was laughing, his head thrown back, holding a tiny porcelain cup. He was with two other men, clones of himself, all exuding that specific type of confidence that comes from never having to check a bank account balance before buying dinner. I froze. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to run back out into the heat and forget the code, forget the passbook, and forget the promise I made to Grandpa Joe. But it was too late. Hunter turned. His eyes scanned the lobby board until they landed on me. He stopped laughing. He blinked as if he couldn't process the glitch in his matrix. Then a slow, cruel smirk spread across his face. He didn't wave. He didn't acknowledge me as family. He nudged the man next to him and pointed. The other man looked over, saw me standing there clutching my purse, and snickered. Hunter pulled out his phone. I saw his thumbs flying across the screen. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look at it to know what was happening. I could visualize the family group chat lighting up. I could hear Chantel's giggle. "Look who is here to beg for a loan," he was probably typing. "The sister who thinks trash is treasure." I felt naked, exposed. I turned my back on him and marched toward the teller line. There were 10 people ahead of me. I stood there for 40 minutes, 40 minutes of shifting from foot to foot. 40 minutes of feeling the eyes of the security guard on my back. 40 minutes of listening to the distant echoing laughter from the VIP section. When it was finally my turn, my hands were sweating so much, I was afraid I would drop the passbook. The teller was a young woman named Tiffany, according to her silver name tag. She had long, perfectly manicured nails and eyes that had seen everything and were impressed by none of it. She was chewing gum with a rhythmic snapping sound. "Next," she said, not looking up from her computer screen. I stepped up to the counter. The glass partition between us felt thick, bulletproof, a barrier between the haves and the have-nots. "How can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she hoped she couldn't. I reached into my bag and pulled out the Ziploc bag wrapped in the silk scarf. I unwrapped it slowly. The passbook looked even worse here under the harsh fluorescent lights of the bank than it had in my kitchen. The gray cover was stained. The edges were fuzzy with mold. It looked like something you would find in the pocket of a corpse dredged from a river. I slid it under the glass. "I need to access this account, please," I said. Tiffany looked down. Her chewing slowed. She stared at the object on her pristine white counter. She didn't touch it. She looked up at me, one eyebrow raised. "What is this?" she asked. "It is a passbook," I said, "from 1952. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "We don't use passbooks, ma'am." We haven't used Passbook since before I was born. Do you have a debit card? An ID? No, I said. Just this. It was my grandfather's. He gave it to me yesterday. She picked up a pen and used the tip of it to flip the cover open, refusing to touch it with her skin. She looked at the first page, then the last. She saw the $50 balance. She saw the date. 1962. Ma'am, she said, dropping the cover back down. This account has been inactive for 60 years. It is purged. It is gone. This is just paper. Please, I pressed, leaning closer to the glass. There is a code. Look at the margin. Grandpa Joe said to use the code. Tiffany sighed. It was a long, loud exhale that blew a strand of hair out of her face. She looked at the line of people behind me. She looked at the security guard ready to signal him over. Listen, she said, her voice dropping to a condescending lecture. I don't know what kind of antique roadshow game you are playing, but this is a serious financial institution. We handle corporate mergers. We handle international trade. We do not process historical trash here, ma'am. The words hit me like a physical slap. Historical trash. It was exactly what Byron had said. Trash belongs with trash. I felt tears pricking my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of Hunter. Not in front of this girl who looked at me like I was a stain on her counter. It is not trash, I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and desperation. Just try. Please. Just type it in. She picked up the passbook with 2 fingers, holding it by the very corner as if it were radioactive. She held it up, making a show of inspecting the mold for the benefit of the impatient customers behind me. I am going to throw this away for you, she said, moving her hand toward the trash can under her desk. And then you are going to leave. No, I slammed my hand against the glass. The sound echoed through the lobby. Hunter stopped talking in the VIP section. The guard took a step forward. Type the code. Tiffany froze. She looked at me, really looked at me, and saw something in my eyes that made her hesitate. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the fury of a woman who has been pushed too far. She rolled her eyes, let the passbook drop back onto the counter, and turned to her keyboard. Fine, she snapped. I will type it in. And when it says error, you are going to take your garbage and get out of my line. She began to type. OMNI-GENESIS-003. I held my breath. The world seemed to narrow down to the sound of her acrylic nails clicking against the plastic keys. Click, click, click. Enter. The sound of Tiffany's finger hitting the enter key echoed like a gunshot in the quiet, sterile air of the bank lobby. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The computer hummed. The air conditioner whirred. Tiffany let out a heavy, satisfied sigh, already preparing the smirk she would use to dismiss me. She opened her mouth to tell me that the code was invalid, that I was wasting her time, and that I needed to take my trash and leave. But the words never left her lips. A low, guttural sound began to emanate from her computer tower. It was not the cheerful chime of a successful transaction, nor was it the sharp buzz of an error. It was a deep, mechanical groan that seemed to vibrate through the marble countertop. Then the screen in front of her flickered. The standard blue and white interface of OmniCorp vanished instantly. In its place, a solid, aggressive block of crimson red filled the monitor. Tiffany blinked, confused. She tapped the escape key. Nothing happened. She tapped it again, harder this time, her long acrylic nail clicking frantically against the plastic. What is this? She muttered, her annoyance turning into frustration. You crashed my system. I told you this old book was garbage. Then the siren started. It was not a fire alarm. It was distinct, rhythmic, and terrifyingly loud. Whoop, whoop, whoop. The sound bounced off the high glass ceiling, shattering the hushed atmosphere of the bank. Every head in the lobby turned toward us. The businessmen in the VIP section stopped their conversations mid-sentence. The people in line behind me took a collective step back as if I were contagious. Security. Tiffany shrieked, jumping back from her desk as if the passbook had physically bitten her. Security. She is hacking the system. I stood frozen. My hands were gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles were white. I had not done anything. I had just given her the code. Panic began to rise in my throat, hot and choking. This was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Grandpa Joe was confused. There was no fortune. There was only a glitch, and now I was going to be arrested for trying to defraud a billion-dollar bank with a piece of moldy paper. The security guard, the one with the thick neck who had tried to send me to the delivery entrance, was moving before the second siren blast had finished. He charged across the lobby, his hand resting on the taser at his belt. He looked vindicated. He looked like a man who had been waiting for an excuse to throw me out since the moment I walked through the revolving doors. "Stay right there," he bellowed, his voice booming over the alarm. "Keep your hands where I can see them." I raised my hands slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I did not do anything. I stammered, but my voice was lost in the noise. The guard reached me in 3 strides. He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging into my cardigan. His grip was painful, humiliating. "I knew you were trouble," he hissed into my ear. "Deliveries in the back." "That is what I said. Now you are going to jail for cyber attacks." He twisted my arm behind my back, forcing me to lean over the counter. My cheek pressed against the cold glass. From this angle I was looking directly at Tiffany. I expected to see triumph on her face. I expected to see her laughing with her coworkers about the crazy woman who got taken down. But I did not see triumph. I saw terror. Tiffany was staring at her screen. The red background was pulsing now like a heartbeat. And in the center of that crimson field, bold white letters had appeared. They were large enough that I could see the reflection of them in her wide, terrified eyes. She was reading the text. Her mouth hung open. Her skin, which had been perfectly bronzed with makeup, drained of all color until she looked like a wax statue. She started to shake. Her hands flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. "Get her out of here!" the guard shouted, pulling me backward. "No!" Tiffany screamed. The sound tore from her throat, desperate and shrill. "Stop!" The guard paused, confused by the sheer panic in her voice. He looked at her, his grip on my arm loosening slightly. "What are you talking about, Tiffany?" She set off the breach protocol. "I am taking her to the holding room." "Let her go!" Tiffany yelled, reaching over the glass partition as if she wanted to physically pull the guard away from me. "Let her go right now. Do not touch her. Look at the screen. Look at the screen, you idiot." The guard frowned. He hesitated, looking from me to Tiffany, and then slowly turned his head toward the monitor. The siren was still blaring, but in the small radius around the teller window the silence was absolute. The guard read the words. I saw his eyes widen. I saw his jaw go slack. The hand that was twisting my arm suddenly went limp. He let go of me as if he had just realized he was holding a live wire. He took a step back, then another, his face paling to match Tiffany's. "What does it say?" I whispered, rubbing my sore arm. Neither of them answered. They were staring at me now, not as a nuisance, not as a criminal, but as if I had just sprouted wings and breathed fire. Tiffany turned the monitor slowly on its swivel base until it faced me. The red light bathed my face. The text was simple. It was brutal. It was absolute. Warning. Level 9. Clearance detected. Account holder, founding member family. Identity verified Sasha Williams. Protocol Omnigenesis. Instruction: do not detain, do not question. Notify branch director immediately. I stared at the words. Level 9. I did not know what that meant, but I knew that the businessmen in the VIP section probably had level 1 or 2. Level 9 sounded like something that did not exist. Something that was buried so deep in the bedrock of the company that nobody knew it was there until they tripped over it. Founding member family, Grandpa Joe, the janitor, the man who sat in his wheelchair and watched soap operas. He was a founding member. Suddenly, the elevator doors at the far end of the lobby chimed. It was the private executive elevator, the one that required a retinal scan to even open. The doors slid apart with a soft hiss. A man burst out. He was not walking. He was running. He was a tall man in a bespoke navy suit, his silver hair usually perfectly coiffed, but now disheveled as if he had run his hands through it in panic. He was wearing a tie that probably cost more than my car. This was Mr. Sterling, the branch director. I recognized him from the oil painting hanging above the fireplace in the VIP lounge. He was the most powerful man in the building. He was the man my father Byron had spent 20 years trying to get a meeting with. Mr. Sterling did not look at the security guards. He did not look at the VIP clients who were standing up watching the drama unfold. He did not look at Hunter, who was still holding his espresso cup, his mouth slightly open in confusion. Mr. Sterling ran straight for me, and he was panting, sweat beaded on his forehead. He practically vaulted over the velvet rope line. When he reached the teller counter, he stopped so abruptly he almost skid on the marble floor. He looked at the screen. He saw the red warning. He saw the level 9 clearance. Then he looked at me. He did not see the cardigan. He did not see the flat shoes. He did not see the archive dust on my hands. He saw the code. Mr. Sterling, the man who ran a billion-dollar branch, the man who could ruin careers with a phone call, did something that made the entire lobby gasp. He bowed. It was not a nod. It was a deep, formal bow from the waist. He stayed there for a full 3 seconds, his head lowered in absolute deference. When he straightened up, he looked terrified. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice breathless but incredibly polite. "I am Marcus Sterling. I am the director of this facility. Please accept my humblest apologies for the delay and for the behavior of my staff." He turned to the security guard who was standing beside me, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. "Did you touch her?" Mr. Sterling asked. His voice dropped an octave. It was quiet, deadly and cold. The guard swallowed hard. The alarm. I thought—" "You are fired," Mr. Sterling said. "Leave the building, now." He did not wait for the guard to respond. He turned back to me, his face transforming back into a mask of eager servitude. "Ms. Williams, we have not had a Genesis protocol activation in 70 years. We were not prepared. This is an honor. Please, you must come with me. The general lobby is not appropriate for someone of your standing." He gestured toward the heavy oak doors that led to the inner sanctum of the bank, the area where the vault was kept. I stood there stunned. I felt the weight of the passbook in my hand. It was no longer trash. It was a weapon. It was a key. And I had just unlocked the world. I looked over Mr. Sterling's shoulder. I saw Hunter standing by the espresso bar. He had dropped his cup. It had shattered on the floor, spilling dark coffee over his expensive shoes. He was staring at me, his face pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. He had seen the director bow. He had seen the guard fired. He knew something impossible was happening. I met his gaze. I did not smile. I did not wave. I just looked at him with the cold, hard stare of a woman who just realized she owned the building he was standing in. "Lead the way, Mr. Sterling," I said. The director ushered me past the stunned teller, past the gawking line, and through the oak doors. As they closed behind me, cutting off the noise of the lobby, I realized that the silence here was different. It was the silence of power. And for the first time in my life, I was the one making the noise. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind us, sealing out the chaos of the lobby. The sudden silence was profound. It was not just quiet. It was the kind of heavy, insulated silence that money buys. The air in here smelled different. It smelled of polished mahogany, old leather, and history. The temperature was perfectly controlled, a stark contrast to the sweltering heat of the street I had just left. Mr. Sterling, the director, who had just bowed to me in front of 50 people, gestured toward a massive chair in the center of the room. "Please, Ms. Williams," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Sit down. Can I get you anything? Water? Champagne?" I shook my head. I was too terrified to drink. I sat on the edge of the leather chair, clutching my purse as if it were a life raft. The passbook was still in my hand, warm from my grip. Mr. Sterling walked around his massive desk, but he did not sit. He stood looking at me, with an expression I could not quite place. It was a mixture of awe and sadness. He walked over to a painting on the wall. It was a portrait of three white men in suits standing in front of the original bank building in 1952. They looked stern, powerful, and proud. Mr. Sterling reached behind the frame and pressed a hidden button. The painting swung open, revealing a steel safe embedded in the wall. He spun the dial, left, right, left. The mechanism clicked, a sound that echoed in the quiet room. He pulled the heavy steel door open and reached inside. He did not pull out stacks of cash or gold bars. He pulled out a single thin file folder made of black leather. It was old, but unlike my passbook, it had been preserved perfectly. He placed the file on the desk between us. He placed his hand on it, covering the label. "Ms. Williams." He began, looking me dead in the eye. "Do you know the history of OmniCorp?" I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. "I know what my father says," I whispered. "He says it was founded by the three men in that painting. The pillars of modern industry." Mr. Sterling nodded slowly. "That is the official story. That is the story we put in the brochures. That is the story we tell the shareholders. But it is not the truth." He opened the black file. Inside was a black and white photograph. It was the same scene as the painting on the wall, the same building, the same three white men. But in the photograph there was a fourth man standing with them. He was standing slightly to the side, wearing workman's clothes, holding a mop bucket, but looking at the camera with a fierce, intelligent gaze. I gasped. I knew those eyes. I knew that jawline. "Grandpa Joe," I whispered. Mr. Sterling nodded. "Joseph Williams." "In 1952, your grandfather was not just a janitor, Sasha. He was a silent partner." The three men in the painting had the connections, but they did not have the liquidity. They were over-leveraged. They were about to go bankrupt before the bank even opened. Your grandfather had saved every penny he earned from working 3 jobs. He was a genius with numbers. He ran an underground lottery in the neighborhood, a numbers game, and he invested the profits flawlessly. Mr. Sterling tapped the photograph. When the bank needed capital to survive its first inspection, the white founders could not get a loan. Nobody would lend to them, so they went to Joe. He gave them the cash they needed. In exchange, he demanded stock. Founders' stock. Class A shares with voting rights. I stared at the photo. My grandfather, the man my father called a senile embarrassment, had bailed out the founders of this empire. But why, I asked, tears welling in my eyes. Why was he erased? Why is he not in the painting? Mr. Sterling looked down ashamed. "Because it was 1952, Sasha. A bank owned by a black man would have lost its charter. The customers would have pulled their money out, so they made a deal. Joe would be the silent partner. He would keep his shares, but his name would never appear on the building. They gave him that passbook as a physical key to his account, coded so deep in the system that only a level 9 clearance could see it. They thought they could buy him out later for cheap." He paused, a grim smile touching his lips. "But they underestimated Joseph Williams. He never sold. He never touched the principal. He let it sit. For 70 years. Mr. Sterling turned the page in the file. He revealed a spreadsheet that was filled with complex calculations. "Sasha, do you know what happens to 500 shares of a major financial institution, over 7 decades of compound interest stock splits and automatic dividend reinvestment?" I shook my head. I was an archivist. I dealt with the past, not the future of finance. Mr. Sterling picked up a calculator. He typed in a few numbers, then turned it toward me. "The OmniCorp stock has split 12 times since 1962. Those 500 shares are now over 200,000 shares. Plus the accumulated dividends, which have been buying more stock automatically every quarter." He pointed to the number on the calculator screen. It was a long string of digits. $85,400,212 $1,000,000.56. The room spun. I gripped the arms of the chair to keep from falling off. $85 million. I thought about the wedding. I thought about the shrimp tail sitting on top of the passbook in the trash can. I thought about Byron laughing. I thought about Hunter kicking the bin. They had thrown away $85 million because it was wrapped in a dirty newspaper. This is mine, I asked, my voice barely audible. It is yours, Mr. Sterling said firmly. Your grandfather named you the sole beneficiary in the Genesis Protocol. He knew his mind was fading. He knew your father would squander it. He waited until you were old enough and strong enough to handle it. He pushed a button on his intercom. Bring me the transfer documents, he ordered. I sat there trying to process the magnitude of it. I could buy the museum where I worked. I could buy the building where Hunter lived. I could buy my father's silence. But then Mr. Sterling's face fell. He was looking at the computer screen on his desk. His brow furrowed. He typed something, then hit the backspace key aggressively. Is there a problem? I asked, the fear returning instantly. Mr. Sterling looked up at me, and for the first time he looked worried. There is a security protocol, he said slowly. Because this account has been dormant for so long, and because the amount is so significant, federal regulations require a secondary verification. We cannot just transfer the funds to your personal account today. We have to mail a physical confirmation code to the address on file to prove residency. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The address on file. 1952. Grandpa Joe lived in the old family house in the district, the house that Byron inherited, the house where Byron still lived. What address is it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mr. Sterling read it off the screen. 742 Oak Street. I closed my eyes. That was it. That was my father's house. We have to send the code via overnight courier, Mr. Sterling explained. It will arrive tomorrow morning. Once you have that code, you bring it here, and the money is yours. My blood ran cold. Tomorrow morning. Byron would be at work, but Chantel was always home in the mornings. And Hunter. Hunter was practically living there since his own condo was being renovated. If that letter arrives at my father's house, I said, my voice rising in panic, they will open it. They open everything. If they see this, if they see the amount, Mr. Sterling leaned forward. If they get that code, Sasha, and if they have the power of attorney over your grandfather, which your father has been trying to get for years, they could try to contest the transfer. They could tie this up in court for a decade. Or worse, if they figure out the code before you do, they could try to transfer it themselves. I stood up. The joy of the $85 million vanished, replaced by the adrenaline of the hunt. I had to get to that mailbox before they did. I had to beat my own family to the prize they had thrown away. Send it, I told Mr. Sterling. Send the letter. He nodded, typing the command. It is done. It will be on the first truck out tomorrow. It should arrive by 10 a.m. I looked at the clock on the wall. I had less than 24 hours to formulate a plan. I had to invade the fortress of the people who hated me. I had to outsmart a hedge fund manager and a corporate executive. And I had to do it without them knowing that the trash they discarded was actually the crown jewels of their empire. I grabbed my purse. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I walked out of the bank not as a rich woman, but as a soldier going to war. As I stepped out into the blinding sun, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Chantel. Hey sis, heard you were begging at Dad's bank today. Hunter said you got kicked out by security. LOL. So embarrassing. I stared at the screen. They thought I was defeated. They thought I was humiliated. I typed back 2 words. See soon. I put the phone in my pocket. They had no idea what was coming for them. The trash was coming home, and it was going to burn the whole house down. The morning sun did not just shine on my father's house, it seemed to assault it. The estate, located at 742 Oak Street, was a sprawling colonial mansion that sat on 2 acres of manicured lawn. It was the kind of house that was built to scream old money, even though everyone in the neighborhood knew Byron had bought it in the 90s during the tech boom. It was a fortress of white pillars and black shutters designed to keep the world out and the illusion of perfection in. Inside the sunroom, the air conditioning was set to a brisk 68 degrees. My sister Chantel was sitting at a glass table that probably cost more than my car. She was surrounded by ring lights, tripods, and diffusers. This was her office. This was where she influenced the world, or at least the 50,000 teenagers who followed her for fashion advice. Chantel smoothed her hair, checking her reflection in the monitor. She was wearing a silk robe that slipped off one shoulder, calculated to look effortless. On the table in front of her sat a bright orange box, the holy grail of fashion, a Hermes bag. She had been on the waiting list for 6 months or so, she would tell her followers. In reality, Hunter had bought it from a reseller for double the price to shut her up about his late nights at the office. She hit the record button. Her face instantly transformed from bored indifference to manic enthusiasm. Hey, my loves, welcome back to the channel. Today is the day. We are finally doing the unboxing you have all been waiting for. I literally cannot breathe right now. She tapped her long manicured nails on the orange box. The sound was sharp like a woodpecker. But first, do not forget to like and subscribe. We are so close to hitting our goal, and I have a special giveaway coming up for my true fans. Just as she began to untie the ribbon, the doorbell rang. It was not the polite chime of a guest. It was the aggressive, repeated buzzing of someone who had a job to do and was running late. Chantel rolled her eyes, her smile dropping for a fraction of a second. Ugh, she whispered to the camera. Real life, right, guys? Probably just another fan mail delivery. 1 second. She did not get up. She shouted toward the hallway. Maria! Get the door! I am filming. A moment later, the housekeeper, a quiet woman who had survived working for my family for 3 years, stepped into the sunroom. She was holding a large, rigid envelope. It was not a normal letter. It was bright red, bordered with yellow hazard stripes, and stamped with the words, "Urgent and biometric verification required." Miss Chantel, Maria said softly, afraid to interrupt the live stream. This just came. The courier said it is extremely urgent. It is for a Mr. Joseph Williams. Chantel groaned. She grabbed the envelope without looking at it. Grandpa Joe does not live here anymore, Maria. How many times do I have to tell you? He is in the home. Just throw it in the trash with his other junk mail. Probably just another hearing aid advertisement. She tossed the red envelope onto the glass table right next to the Hermes box. It landed face up. The logo of OmniCorp Bank was printed in gold foil in the corner. Underneath it, in bold black letters, were the words, Level 9, Security Clearance, Do Not Tamper. Chantel turned back to the camera, composing herself. Sorry about that, loves. Just some boring paperwork. Now where were we? Ah, yes, the reveal. She reached for the ribbon of the orange box, but her eyes snagged on the red envelope. Something about the gold foil caught the light. OmniCorp. That was Dad's bank. But Grandpa Joe had never banked there. He kept his money in a coffee can, or so they joked. Curiosity, that fatal flaw of the idle rich, took over. While keeping one eye on the camera lens, she used her thumb to slide the envelope closer. It was heavy, thicker than a normal letter. She kept talking to her audience. You guys know I only invest in quality. And speaking of quality, she was acting on autopilot. Her hand drifted to the red envelope. She ripped the tab. It made a loud tearing sound that the microphone picked up clearly. She pulled out a single sheet of heavy bonded paper. She glanced down at it, expecting a bill or a medical notice. Her eyes scanned the header. Confirmation of assets. Beneficiary, Sasha Williams. Sasha. Her brow furrowed. Why was Sasha's name on a letter sent to Dad's house? And why was it from Dad's bank? She read the next line. Account number OmniGenesis 003. Total liquid assets verified as of this morning. Then she saw the number. Chantel stopped breathing. She stopped talking. The smile slid off her face like wet paint. She brought the paper closer to her face, blinking rapidly. She thought it was a typo. She thought it was a prank. $85,400,212. She did not scream immediately. Her brain could not process the integer. She looked at the Hermes box, which cost $20,000. Then she looked at the paper. 85 million. That was 4,000 Hermes bags. That was enough to buy the entire neighborhood. And it was in Sasha's name. Sasha. The sister she had laughed at yesterday for wearing a dress from a department store. No, she whispered. This is fake. This is a joke. But her hand was shaking. She was holding the paper up right in front of her chest, and in her shock, she had forgotten the one cardinal rule of live streaming. Always know what is in the frame. For exactly 3 seconds, the letter faced the high-definition webcam. The bold text, the account number, and the staggering dollar amount were broadcast live to 42,000 people. Then the reality hit her. She screamed. It was a high, piercing shriek that sounded less like a human and more like a banshee. She dropped the letter as if it were on fire. She scrambled for the mouse, knocking over a ring light in the process. The light crashed onto the glass table, shattering the bulb. End stream, she yelled. End stream! She clicked the button frantically. The screen went dark, but the damage was done. The internet is forever. Someone had screenshotted it. Someone had seen it. Chantel sat there hyperventilating. The red envelope lay on the floor amidst the broken glass of the ring light. Suddenly the double doors of the sunroom flew open. My father Byron stood there. He was wearing his silk pajamas and a velvet robe, holding a cup of coffee. He looked annoyed. "What in God's name is going on?" he bellowed. "I can hear you screaming from the study. Did you break a nail? Or did the internet go down?" Chantel could not speak. She pointed a shaking finger at the floor. At the letter. Byron walked over, crunching glass under his slippers. He looked down at the paper with disdain. "What is this?" he asked. "Another speeding ticket." He bent down and picked it up. He adjusted his reading glasses. He read the first line. He stiffened. He read the second line. The cup of coffee slipped from his hand. It hit the floor with the dull thud, splashing dark liquid over his velvet slippers and the expensive Persian rug. He did not even notice. He stared at the number. $85 million. This is the passbook, he whispered. The trash I threw away. He looked up at Chantel. His eyes were wide, manic. He looked like a man who had just realized he had been sitting on a gold mine while begging for copper. "It is real," Chantel whimpered. "Daddy, it is real. Sasha is rich. Sasha is richer than us." No, Byron snapped. His shock was instantly replaced by a cold, predatory focus. He was an HR director. He knew how to manipulate rules. He knew how to twist situations. Read the bottom, Chantel. Read the fine print. Chantel crawled over and looked at the paper in his hand. To complete transfer, the beneficiary must present the physical confirmation code enclosed in this letter to the branch director within 24 hours. Byron looked at the letter. There, stapled to the bottom, was a tear-off slip with a complex alphanumeric code. "She does not have the money yet," Byron said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "She needs this code, and we have it." He looked at the address on the envelope. 742 Oak Street. "The bank sent it here because this is the address on Joe's old file." He laughed. A harsh barking sound. They sent the key to the castle right to the wolves. He grabbed Chantel's arm, pulling her up from the floor. "Get up," he ordered. "Stop crying." "What do we do, Daddy?" she asked. "Sasha will come for it. She knows it is here." "Let her come," Byron sneered. "She can come and beg. But she is not getting this piece of paper. Not until we get what we deserve." He shoved the letter into the pocket of his robe. "Call Hunter," he commanded. "Call him right now. Tell him to get his ass over here. Tell him I found the capital he needs for his fund." But Daddy Chantel stammered. "It is Sasha's name. It is illegal." Byron turned on her, his face inches from hers. His eyes were dark, filled with greed and desperation. "It is not illegal if we have power of attorney over Joe. We are going to declare Joe incompetent. We are going to take stewardship of this account, and Hunter is going to help us move it offshore before Sasha can even get a lawyer on the phone." He looked at the Hermes box on the table. "We have to get this money back, Chantel, before that idiot knows how to spend it. Now call him." As Chantel fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers, Byron walked to the window. He looked out at the driveway, half expecting to see my battered car pulling up. He touched the letter in his pocket. He felt powerful again. He felt like the winner. He had no idea that I was not coming to beg. He had no idea that I was already moving and that I wasn't playing by his rules anymore. But for now, inside the fortress of Oak Street, the villains thought they had won the lottery. The sun had set hours ago, leaving my small apartment bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights outside. I was sitting on my second-hand sofa staring at the empty space on the wall where I usually hung my calendar. My mind was racing. I had a plan. I had the code coming in the mail. I had the bank director on my side. All I had to do was survive the night. I checked the locks on my front door for the third time. The deadbolt was flimsy, a piece of cheap brass that rattled when the wind blew. It was enough to keep out a casual thief, but I knew it would not stop the kind of greed that was currently burning through my family. I was just about to turn off the lights and try to get some sleep when a knock echoed through the small room. It was not the tentative tap of a neighbor asking for sugar. It was a rhythmic, authoritative pounding. 3 sharp raps. Pause. 3 sharp raps. It was the knock of someone who believed they owned the door and the building it was attached to. I froze. My husband David was working the night shift. I was alone. I walked to the door on silent feet and peered through the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the hallway, but there was no mistaking the group standing there. It was the royal procession. My father Byron was standing in front wearing a cashmere sweater and a look of practiced concern. Behind him was my stepmother Linda, holding a large foil-wrapped dish. Chantel was leaning against the peeling wallpaper of the hallway, scrolling on her phone, looking like she was waiting for a valet to bring her car. And in the back, lurking in the shadows like a shark in shallow water, was Hunter. They were here. They had not waited for morning. They had come to the wolves' den. I took a deep breath. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Sasha, my stepmother, cried out before I could even say hello. She rushed forward, enveloping me in a cloud of heavy floral perfume. Her hug was tight, suffocating, and completely performative. "We were so worried about you. You just ran off yesterday without saying goodbye." She pulled back, holding me at arm's length, scanning my face for cracks. "We brought you dinner. It is Byron's favorite lasagna. We know how much you love Italian. I hate lasagna. I have been lactose intolerant since I was 12, a fact they would know if they had ever paid attention to a single meal I ate. But I forced a smile. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They filed into my apartment. It was instantly too small. Byron took up the entire entryway. Chantel walked in on her tiptoes, trying not to let her limited edition sneakers touch my rug. Hunter walked in last, closing the door behind him with a definitive click. He locked it. I noticed that. He locked me in with them. "Wow," Chantel said, looking around at my mismatched furniture and the stack of books on the floor. "It is so quaint. Really cozy, Sasha. It is like a little dollhouse." She ran a finger over my bookshelf, then subtly wiped the dust on her jeans. Byron did not look at the furniture. He looked at me. He had transformed. The man who had sneered at my wedding, the man who had called my grandfather trash, was gone. In his place was the benevolent patriarch, the father who just wanted to guide his wayward sheep. "Sasha, honey," Byron said, his voice deep and soothing. He sat down on my armchair, looking ridiculously out of place. "Look, I know things got a little heated at the wedding. Weddings are stressful. We were all hot and tired. I might have said some things I did not mean. He gestured for me to sit on the sofa opposite him. Linda sat next to me, patting my knee. Hunter remained standing, leaning against the kitchen counter, blocking the path to the bedroom where I kept my purse. I am sorry, Byron continued. I really am. I was just disappointed, Sasha. Not in you. Never in you. I was disappointed in Joe. I hate seeing him like that, losing his mind, giving away garbage like it is treasure. It hurts a son to see his father deteriorate. He sighed, a sound of heavy, burdened love. I watched him. I watched the way his eyes darted around the room, scanning surfaces, looking for the gray passbook. He was good. If I did not know about the $85 million, I might have believed him. I might have thought he was just a snob trying to make amends. But I knew. And that knowledge made his performance look grotesque. I accepted your apology, Dad, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Good. Byron smiled, showing his capped teeth. Good. Now we need to talk about practicalities. Chantel told me you went to the bank today. I felt the tension in the room spike. Hunter straightened up. Chantel stopped looking at her nails. I did, I said. I just wanted to see if the account was still active. And Byron asked, leaning forward. And nothing, I lied. They said they have to look into it. It is an old account. Byron let out a laugh. A relieved, hearty chuckle. Of course they do. It is ancient. It is probably a bureaucratic nightmare. Listen, Sasha. That is actually why we are here. Hunter and I were talking. Dealing with OmniCorp is not like dealing with a regular bank. It is complicated. There are fees. There are legal hurdles. If you try to do this alone, they will eat you alive. Hunter stepped forward. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, trying to look casual. Your dad is right, Sasha. OmniCorp is a shark tank. If there is any money in that account, even just a few $1,000s, they will find a way to keep it in fees. I can help you. I can waive the fees. I can transfer it into a high-yield trust for you. Linda squeezed my knee again. We just want to protect you, sweetie. You work so hard at that museum. You deserve a little break. Let the men handle the boring paperwork. Byron nodded solemnly. Exactly. And frankly, Sasha, I am worried about you keeping that passbook here, in this apartment. He gestured vaguely at my front door. This neighborhood is not safe. Anyone could break in. If you lose that book, you lose whatever small inheritance Joe left you. It is irresponsible to keep it in a place with such flimsy locks. He held out his hand. His palm was open. It looked like a trap. Give the book to me, Sasha. I will put it in my safe at the house. It will be secure there. When the bank sorts everything out, I will bring it right back to you. I promise. The room went silent. They were all looking at me. Linda's hand had stopped patting my knee and was now gripping it. Chantel was holding her breath. Hunter was staring at me with the intensity of a predator who smells blood. I looked at my father's hand. I looked at the lifeline etched into his palm. I thought about the letter sitting on his desk at home. I thought about the code he was planning to steal. I stood up slowly. I walked over to the small drawer in my TV stand. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I opened the drawer. I pulled out the Ziploc bag. The passbook was inside, visible through the plastic. I turned around. The reaction was instantaneous. Byron sat up straight, his relaxed posture vanishing. Hunter took a step away from the counter. Chantel's eyes went wide, dilating in the dim light. I walked back to the coffee table. I did not give it to Byron. I placed it in the center of the table, right next to the foil-wrapped lasagna. Is this what you want? I asked softly. They did not look at me. They looked at the book. It was primal. It was the look of a starving animal seeing fresh meat. Byron's jaw worked, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. Hunter was practically vibrating, his hands twitching at his sides. Linda let go of my knee and leaned forward, her hunger breaking through her mask of maternal concern. For a second, the mask slipped completely. I saw the greed. I saw the desperation. I saw exactly how much $85 million meant to people who had sold their souls for status. Yes, Byron whispered, his voice hoarse. Yes, Sasha. That is it. Just let me take care of it. He reached out, his hand was trembling. I watched his fingers inch closer to the plastic bag. He thought he had won. He thought I was the naive, stupid daughter who needed daddy to save her. He thought he was seconds away from stealing a fortune. I let his fingers brush the plastic. I let him feel the cold triumph of touch. And then, just as he was about to close his fist around it, I spoke. You know, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a whip crack. It is funny you mentioned the neighborhood being unsafe, because the only thieves I have ever seen in this apartment are sitting in my living room right now. The silence that followed my accusation was heavy enough to crush the furniture. I had called them thieves in my own living room. I watched my father's face turn a shade of purple that usually preceded a screaming match. I watched my stepmother clutch her pearls, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But it was Hunter who moved first. He did not scream. He did not deny it. He simply laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that scraped against my nerves. He pushed himself off the kitchen counter where he had been leaning and walked into the center of the room. He circled the coffee table, moving with the predatory grace of a man who was used to intimidating people in boardrooms. He stopped right in front of me, invading my personal space until I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the faint metallic scent of his desperation. Okay, Hunter said, his voice dropping to a low conversational tone that was infinitely more terrifying than a shout. Let us cut the theatrics, Sasha. You want to play the victim? Fine. Play the victim. But while you are playing moral high ground, the real world is about to come crashing down on your head. He unbuttoned his suit jacket and reached into the inner pocket. He pulled out a folded document. It was thick, legal size. Do you have any idea what happens when a person with your financial profile suddenly acquires $85 million? He asked. He did not wait for an answer. I will tell you. The moment that money hits your account, you trigger a Level 1 audit from the IRS. They will freeze your assets. They will seize your laptop. They will dig through every tax return you have ever filed. They will look at every $5 coffee you ever bought. He took a step closer. I forced myself not to back away. And that is just the government, Sasha. Then comes the bank. You think OmniCorp is going to just hand over a fortune to you? You, an archivist who drives a 10-year-old Honda. They will flag the transaction for money laundering. They will tie you up in litigation for 10 years. They will bleed you dry with legal fees until that 85 million becomes zero. Byron nodded from the armchair, chiming in like a backup singer. He is right, honey. You do not understand these things. It is a burden, a terrible burden. Hunter held up the document in his hand. He waved it in front of my face. This is a custodial management agreement, he said. I had my legal team draft it up an hour ago. It establishes a blind trust. I will be the trustee. I will move the capital into a diversified portfolio in the Cayman Islands before the IRS can even print the audit notice. I will handle the taxes. I will handle the bank. I will handle the lawyers. He thrust the papers toward my chest. I instinctively reached out and took them. The paper felt heavy like lead. You think the bank will let a librarian like you hold $85 million? Hunter sneered, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. They will eat you alive, Sasha. They will chew you up and spit you out. You are a minnow swimming with sharks. Only I can protect you. I looked down at the document in my hands. The top page read, Irrevocable Power of Attorney. I scanned the first paragraph. It gave Hunter full control over all my assets. It gave him the right to buy, sell, and transfer funds without my permission. It gave him the right to pay himself a management fee of 5% annually. That was $4 million a year just for existing. It was not a protection agreement. It was a surrender. It was a document that would turn me into a prisoner in my own life, begging my brother-in-law for an allowance while he spent my grandfather's legacy on sports cars and bad investments. I looked at Byron. He was watching me with hungry eyes. Just sign it, sweetheart, he urged. Hunter knows best. I looked at Chantel. She was chewing on her lip, already mentally spending the money Hunter would siphon off for her. Then I looked at Hunter. He was smiling. It was the arrogant, self-assured smile of a man who thought he had already won. He thought I was scared. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was still the little girl who sat at the kids' table while the adults talked about money. I held the contract up. "You are right, Hunter," I said softly. "I do not know anything about offshore accounts. I do not know how to evade taxes." Hunter's smile widened. "Exactly. That is why you need me. Do you have a pen?" "No," I said. "I do not need a pen." I gripped the top of the thick stack of papers with both hands. I locked eyes with him. I channeled every ounce of rage I had suppressed for 30 years. Every birthday they forgot, every insult they whispered, every time they made me feel small. I pulled my hands apart. The sound of the paper tearing was loud in the small room. It sounded like a gunshot. Rip! Hunter's smile vanished. His face went slack with shock. "What are you doing?" he shouted. I did not answer. I put the two halves together and ripped them again. And again. I tore the contract into quarters, then into eighths. I tore it until my hands hurt. I tore it until the floor was littered with confetti made of their greed. I threw the pieces into the air. They rained down on Hunter's expensive Italian shoes like snow. "I do not need your protection, Hunter," I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. "And I definitely do not need your permission. Get out of my house." The sound of the contract tearing was still echoing in the room when Byron's fist came down on the coffee table. It was a violent, explosive slam that made the foil-wrapped lasagna jump an inch into the air. The mask of the concerned father evaporated instantly, replaced by the twisted, red-faced rage of a man who was used to being obeyed without question. "You stupid, ungrateful girl!" Byron roared, spitting the words at me. "You think you can just rip up a legal document and walk away with a fortune? You think you are smart enough to outmaneuver us?" He stood up, towering over me in the small living room. His shadow stretched across the peeling wallpaper, making him look like a monster from a childhood nightmare. "That passbook is not yours," Byron shouted. "Joe is 89 years old. He has dementia. He does not know what day of the week it is, let alone the value of what he was handing out. That gift is void, Sasha. It is legally void." Hunter stepped in, smoothing his suit jacket, his voice dripping with icy malice. "Your father is right. In the eyes of the law, Joe is mentally incompetent. He lacks the capacity to transfer assets. That means the passbook belongs to his estate. And since Byron is his next of kin, it belongs to him." Byron pointed a shaking finger at my face. "I am going to court tomorrow morning. I am filing for an emergency conservatorship over your grandfather. I will have a judge declare him incapacitated retroactively. I will prove that you, a desperate low-income woman, manipulated a senile old man into giving you his life savings." He leaned in closer, his expensive cologne turning sour with sweat. "By the time I am done with you, Sasha, you won't just lose the money. You will lose everything. I will have you charged with elder abuse. I will make sure you never work in a museum again. I will bury you under so much litigation you will be paying me legal fees for the rest of your miserable life." Chantel was nodding in the corner, looking at me with a mixture of fear and smug satisfaction. "You should have just signed the paper, Sasha," she whispered. "You always have to make things difficult." I looked at them. My father, who was willing to label his own father insane just to steal his money. My brother-in-law, who threatened to ruin my career. My sister, who watched it all like it was a reality show. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. All that was left was clarity. I walked to the front door and threw it open. The cool night air rushed in, smelling of rain and asphalt. It was the smell of freedom. "Get out," I said. Byron laughed, a harsh barking sound. We are not leaving until I get that book. I picked up my phone. I have the police on speed dial. I said, my voice flat and dead. You are trespassing. And since you just threatened me, I am sure they would love to hear the recording I just made of this entire conversation. Hunter's eyes widened. He looked at the phone in my hand, then at Byron. We have to go, Byron, he muttered. If the police come, it complicates the filing. Byron glared at me, his chest heaving. He looked at the passbook sitting on the table, then at me. This is not over, he hissed. You have started a war you cannot win, Sasha. He marched toward the door. Linda scrambled after him, clutching her purse. Hunter followed, buttoning his jacket with aggressive movements. Chantel gave me one last dirty look before sashaying into the hallway. As they stepped out, I looked at the coffee table, the foil-wrapped lasagna, the bottle of wine, the peace offerings they had brought to bribe me. Wait, I called out. Byron turned around, hope flickering in his eyes. Did you change your mind? I walked over to the table. I picked up the lasagna and the wine. I walked to the doorway. Do not forget to take your trash with you, I said. I dropped the items at their feet. The foil dish crunched. The wine bottle clinked against the concrete floor. I slammed the door in their faces. I threw the deadbolt. Then I slid the chain lock into place. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, listening to their footsteps retreating down the hall, listening to Byron cursing, listening to the silence returning to my apartment. I thought I had won the battle. I thought I had stood my ground. But I had underestimated how fast a shark can swim. The next morning I woke up at 7. I dressed in my best suit. I made coffee. I felt strong. I was ready to go to the bank, meet Mr. Sterling, and claim my inheritance. I picked up my phone to check my checking account just to make sure I had enough gas money to get downtown. I opened the banking app. I logged in. My stomach dropped. The room spun. Where my balance used to be, there was only a gray bar. And across the screen, in bold red letters, was a single word that shattered my world. Frozen. I clicked on the notification. A pop-up window appeared. Court order, case number 7742. Emergency injunction granted. All assets frozen pending conservatorship hearing. Byron had not waited for morning. He had a judge in his pocket. He had struck while I was sleeping. I had the passbook, but he had the law, and the war had just begun. I stood in the break room of the museum, staring at the small television mounted in the corner, clutching a paper cup of cold coffee until it buckled in my hand. Hunter's face filled the screen. He was sitting on a plush beige sofa in a morning talk show studio, the kind that plays soft piano music while destroying lives. He looked devastated. He was wearing a soft blue sweater instead of his usual sharp suit, a calculated wardrobe choice designed to make him look soft, approachable, and victimized. He wiped a non-existent tear from his cheek with a practiced motion. It is just heartbreaking, Hunter said, his voice cracking perfectly on the last syllable. We have tried to care for Grandpa Joe for years. We paid for his care. We visited him every Sunday. We tried to shield him from the world. And then in a moment of confusion, my sister-in-law, well, she took advantage of him. The host leaned in, her face twisted in performative sympathy. You mean she manipulated him? Hunter nodded slowly, looking down at his hands. She manipulated a senile man into signing over his life savings. We just want to protect him. We want to make sure his legacy is not squandered. It is a tragedy when greed tears a family apart. I felt bile rise in my throat. It was a masterclass in fiction. But the real blow came an hour later. My phone buzzed with an email from my lawyer. It was a copy of the emergency motion Byron had filed that morning. Attached to it was an affidavit from a Dr. Eris Thorne. I looked up the name on my work computer. He was a concierge doctor known for writing prescriptions for the rich and famous, a man who had lost his license in 2 other states before setting up shop here. The report was clinical and brutal. It stated that Dr. Thorne had examined Grandpa Joe's medical records and concluded that he had been suffering from advanced cognitive decline for 5 years. 5 years. That date was not random. It was calculated. It predated the wedding. It predated the gift. It predated every conversation I had had with Grandpa about his history. If the judge believed this report, everything Grandpa did in the last half-decade was legally void. My father was not just stealing the money, he was erasing Grandpa's mind. He was rewriting history to say that Joe Williams had been an empty shell for years. I tried to turn off the TV, but the noise seemed to follow me. When I walked out to the main lobby of the museum to get some air, I stopped dead in my tracks. Through the glass doors I saw them. A swarm of reporters, microphones with channel logos, cameramen with heavy lenses. They were gathered on the museum steps like vultures waiting for a carcass. They wanted the greedy granddaughter. They wanted the villain Hunter had painted. I saw a flash of movement. One of the reporters spotted me through the glass. She pointed and suddenly the whole pack turned toward the door. They started shouting my name, their voices muffled by the glass but still terrifying. Is it true you stole from a dementia patient? Are you planning to return the money? How do you sleep at night? I could not go out there. I could not face them. I felt the walls closing in. I felt small. I felt exactly how Byron wanted me to feel. Powerless. So I did what I always did when the world became too loud. I went down. I turned around and ran toward the service corridor. I swiped my badge and stepped into the freight elevator. I pressed the button for the sub-basement. The archives. My sanctuary. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sunlight and the noise. The elevator descended with a heavy metallic groan. When the doors opened, the smell hit me. Old paper, dust, decay. To most people it smelled like death. To me it smelled like truth. The air down here was cool and still. The silence was absolute. I walked down the long rows of metal shelving, my heels clicking on the concrete. I needed to keep my hands busy. I needed to remember who Grandpa Joe really was, not the invalid my father was describing in court. I remembered that Grandpa Joe had donated a few boxes of his personal papers to the museum years ago, back when he was a janitor here. They were never cataloged. They were considered low priority. They were just labeled miscellaneous staff records. I found the shelf in the back corner under a flickering fluorescent bulb. Box 4. I pulled it down. It was heavy, covered in a layer of gray dust. I sat on the floor, ignoring the dirt on my suit skirt. I opened the cardboard flaps. Inside were old newspapers, receipts for cleaning supplies, and a folded janitor's uniform. I touched the fabric, feeling the rough cotton. This was his life. This was the work he did to build the fortune he gave me. I dug deeper, moving aside a stack of yellowed pay stubs. My hand hit something hard and cold at the bottom of the box. I pulled it out. It was a small iron box about the size of a brick. It was rusted shut, heavy and solid. It looked like it had been welded by hand. I wiped away the grime on the lid with my thumb. There was no keyhole. There were no hinges, but there was something etched into the metal surface. I squinted in the dim light. It was not a name. It was not a code. It was a date. October 14th, 1952, the same date as the last entry in the passbook, and underneath the date, etched in crude, jagged letters, was a single word that made my breath catch in my throat. Leverage. The rusted iron box sat heavy in my lap. My hands were shaking, not from the chill of the museum basement, but from the terrifying anticipation of what lay inside. I used a flathead screwdriver from the janitor's cart to pry open the lid. The metal groaned and gave way, releasing a puff of stale air that smelled of tobacco and peppermint, the scent of my grandfather. Inside there was no gold. There were no jewels. There was only a thick leather-bound ledger and a manila envelope sealed with red wax. I reached for the ledger first. I expected it to be the ramblings of a confused mind, I expected to see the deterioration Dr. Thorne had described in his affidavit pages filled with nonsense or blank stares captured in ink. I opened to a random page. The date was 3 years ago, April 4th. Byron visited today. He brought me a cup of coffee that was cold. He spent 5 minutes asking about my health and 45 minutes talking about his liquidity problems. He asked for $5,000 for a quote-unquote home repair. I know for a fact he put a down payment on a boat yesterday. I gave him the check because it is cheaper than listening to him beg. He thinks I am deaf. He called Linda on his way out and said, "The old man is fading fast, easy pickings." They mistake my silence for stupidity. I gasped. The handwriting was not shaky. It was sharp, precise, and elegant. It was the writing of a man who was fully in control of his faculties. I flipped forward. August 12th. Hunter came by. He tried to explain a complex annuity to me. He used big words assuming I would get confused. I let him talk for an hour. When he left, I checked the prospectus. It is a Ponzi scheme wrapped in a pretty bow. I told him I forgot where my checkbook was. He looked like he wanted to hit me. I must move the passbook to a safer location soon. Sasha is the only one with a heart pure enough to handle the burden of the Genesis account. Tears streamed down my face. Grandpa Joe had not been lost in the fog of dementia. He had been playing a long game. He had been undercover in his own life, watching his family circle him like vultures, documenting every lie, every theft, every betrayal. He was not a victim. He was a spy. I closed the ledger and picked up the manila envelope. On the front, in that same steady hand, was my name, Sasha. I broke the wax seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter and a stack of photocopies. "My dearest Sasha," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, or they have finally made their move to declare me incompetent. Do not cry for me. I have lived a long life, but I cannot rest until I know you are safe from them. I read on my heart hammering against my ribs. Your father and your brother-in-law believe power comes from shouting. They believe wealth is something you wear. They are wrong. Real power is leverage, and I have been collecting leverage for 20 years. I pulled out the stack of photocopies from behind the letter. My breath caught in my throat. They were copies of checks, hundreds of them, Social Security checks, pension disbursements, dividend payouts. All of them made out to Joseph Williams, and all of them endorsed on the back with a signature that looked like my grandfather's, but wasn't. I recognized the loop of the Y. I recognized the sharp slant of the T. It was Byron's handwriting. My father had not just been asking for money. He had been forging Grandpa's signature for a decade. He had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars, funneling it into his own accounts to fund his country club membership and his luxury cars. I looked back at the letter. These are the receipts, Sasha. Every stolen dime, every forged document. I let them do it because I was building a case. This is not just evidence of theft. It is evidence of federal wire fraud and elder abuse. If they try to take the Genesis account from you, if they try to hurt you, you do not need a lawyer. You need the FBI. Use this. Finish it. I sat there in the silence of the archives. The fear that had paralyzed me upstairs, the shame I felt watching the news report, it all evaporated. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. I was not the helpless granddaughter anymore. I was the woman holding the smoking gun. I wiped my tears. I put the papers back in the envelope. I put the ledger in my bag. Then I pulled out my phone. I looked at the screen. I had 5 missed calls from Hunter. He was probably calling to gloat or to threaten me with more legal action. I took a deep breath. I channeled every ounce of acting ability I had. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to let their guard down for one final fatal mistake. I dialed Hunter's number. He picked up on the first ring. "Well, well," Hunter said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Look who decided to call. Did you see the news, Sasha? You look great on camera." I let my voice tremble. I forced a sob into my throat. Hunter, please, I whispered, making myself sound small and broken. Please make it stop. The reporters, they are everywhere. I cannot go outside. I cannot lose my job. Hunter laughed. It was a cruel, satisfied sound. I told you, Sasha. I told you the world would eat you alive. You should have signed the papers. I know, I cried. I know. You were right. I was stupid. I just want it to be over. I do not want the money. I just want my life back. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear him smiling. That is a smart decision, Sasha. We can make it all go away. We can issue a retraction. We can tell the judge it was a misunderstanding. But you need to sign the power of attorney. Today, I promised, sniffing loudly. I will sign anything. Just please tell Byron to call off the lawyers. Meet me, Hunter said. 1 hour. The coffee shop on 3rd Street. Bring the passbook. And Sasha, do not try anything stupid. I won't, I whispered. I surrender. I hung up the phone. I stared at the blank screen, my expression hardening into stone. I surrender, I repeated to the empty room. I stood up, smoothing down my skirt. I picked up the iron box. I was going to the coffee shop. I was going to meet Hunter. But I wasn't going to surrender. I was going to deliver the bill. And payment was due immediately. The coffee shop on 3rd Street was crowded and smelled of burnt roast and damp umbrellas. It was the kind of place where people came to hide in plain sight, buried in their laptops and noise-canceling headphones. I walked in with my shoulders hunched, clutching the iron box to my chest like a shield. I had spent 20 minutes in the car fixing my makeup to look worse. I added shadows under my eyes. I rubbed my mascara so it looked like I had been crying for hours. I needed to look like a broken woman. Hunter was sitting in a booth at the back away from the window. He was wearing a different suit today, a light gray sharkskin number that probably cost more than my rent for the year. He was tapping furiously on his phone, looking annoyed. When he saw me approaching, he did not stand up. He did not smile. He just pointed a manicured finger at the seat across from him. "You are late," he said, not bothering to look up from his screen. "Sit down, and put that rusty box on the floor. It is getting dirt on the table." I sat down, keeping the box on my lap. I let my hands tremble as I reached for a napkin. I dabbed at my dry eyes, making a small, pathetic sniffing sound. "I am sorry, Hunter," I whispered, keeping my voice thin and wavering. "The traffic. And the reporters. I was scared they followed me." Hunter finally put his phone down. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You look terrible, Sasha. I told you this would happen. I told you that you were not built for this life. Wealth is a contact sport. You are just a spectator." I nodded, staring at the table. "You were right. You were right about everything. I cannot take it anymore. Byron called me a thief. The news says I abuse the elderly. I just want it to stop." Hunter leaned back, crossing his arms. A smug, satisfied smile spread across his face. It was the look of a predator who knows the prey has stopped running. "I can make it stop, Sasha. I have the retraction statement right here. I have the settlement agreement. You sign over the power of attorney and the conservatorship lawsuit disappears. The reporters go away. You can go back to your little basement and your dusty books." I reached for the papers he slid across the table, but I hesitated. My hand hovered over the signature line. "Hunter," I asked, looking up at him with wide, fearful eyes, "what will happen to Grandpa Joe? If I sign this, will he be okay?" Hunter rolled his eyes. "He is fine. We will put him in a facility, somewhere quiet." "But the doctor," I pressed. "Dr. Thorne said he has been incompetent for 5 years. Is that true? Did Grandpa really not know me?" Hunter let out a short, sharp laugh. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice not out of fear, but out of intimacy. He wanted to share the secret of his brilliance. He wanted to brag. "Sasha, grow up. It does not matter if the old man is crazy or if he is doing crossword puzzles in ink." Doctor. Thorne writes what I pay him to write. My breath hitched, and the judge I asked. Judge Reynolds. He signed the emergency order so fast. Hunter smirked. He picked up his espresso cup, swirling the dark liquid. Judge Reynolds and I go way back. His re-election campaign was struggling. I made a donation, a very generous donation. In this town, justice is just another commodity. You buy it like you buy groceries. It does not matter if Joe is sane. It matters that I have the money to buy the gavel. I looked down at the table, hiding the flash of rage in my eyes. So, it is all a lie. The diagnosis, the lawsuit. It is a strategy, Hunter corrected. And it won. Now sign the papers. I picked up the pen he offered. I held it loosely. And what about Chantel? I asked softly. She said she wants to buy a villa in Italy. She said half the money is hers. Hunter scoffed. The sound was so dismissive it almost made me flinch. Chantel is an idiot, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. She thinks money grows on Instagram. If I gave her access to $85 million, she would blow it on handbags and vacations in a month. He leaned across the table, his eyes locking onto mine. Chantel is not getting a dime of the principal, Sasha. I am moving the funds to a blind trust in the Cayman Islands tomorrow. I will give her a monthly allowance to keep her quiet and looking pretty. But the control, the power, that stays with me. She is just a trophy. And trophies do not write checks. I stared at him. He had just admitted to bribery, fraud, and conspiring to steal from his own wife. He was so confident in his victory that he did not even realize he was standing on a trapdoor. I put the pen down. I stopped sniffing. I sat up straight. I rolled my shoulders back and took a deep breath, letting the mask of the terrified victim fall away. I looked at Hunter. I let him see the real Sasha, the Sasha who spent her life preserving the truth. You know, Hunter, I said, my voice suddenly steady and clear, that is a very interesting plan. The Caymans, the judge, cutting out Chantel. Hunter frowned. The change in my demeanor confused him. He squinted at me. What are you talking about? Just sign the paper. No, I said. I do not think I will. I reached into the breast pocket of my blazer. I pulled out a pen. It was a thick, silver ballpoint pen. I placed it gently on the table between us, right next to his legal documents. That is a nice pen, Hunter muttered, confused. So what? I smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. It is not just a pen, Hunter. It is a voice-activated recorder, high definition, 400-hour capacity. Hunter froze. His eyes flicked from my face to the silver pen. It has been recording since I walked in, I explained, keeping my voice cheerful. It picked up everything. The part about bribing Dr. Thorne, the part about buying Judge Reynolds, and my personal favorite, the part where you called your wife an idiot and admitted to stealing her inheritance. The color drained from Hunter's face so fast it looked like a physical blow. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the pen as if it were a poisonous snake. You cannot. That is illegal, he stammered, his arrogance replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. Actually, I said, leaning in close. I checked with my lawyer this morning. This is a one-party consent state. As long as I know I am recording, it is perfectly admissible in court. And I think the FBI is going to find it very interesting. Hunter lunged for the pen. I was faster. I snatched it off the table and dropped it into the iron box on my lap, snapping the heavy lid shut. I stood up. I looked down at him. The shark was now the bait. I am going to the bank now, Hunter, and then I am going to the police station. You might want to call your friend the judge. I think he is going to need a refund on that donation. The grand ballroom of the OmniCorp gala was a sea of black tuxedos and diamond jewelry. It smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. For my father, Byron, this was not just a party. It was a coronation. He stood near the center of the room, holding a crystal flute of champagne, looking like a man who had finally conquered the world. He was surrounded by 3 junior executives who hung on his every word, nodding like bobbleheads. Byron took a sip of his drink and gestured expansively. "You know," he said, his voice loud enough to be overheard by the CEO standing nearby. "Managing generational wealth is a heavy burden. My father, God rest his soul, left a significant trust. 8 figures. Most families would crumble under the pressure, but we are launching the Williams Foundation. It is all about giving back." He paused for effect, letting them admire his fake altruism. The executives murmured their approval. "It must be difficult," one of them said, "dealing with probate and legal fees." Byron waved his hand dismissively. "We have a family office handling it. My son-in-law Hunter is structuring the assets. We are looking at a very aggressive growth strategy. We plan to inject significant capital into OmniCorp's new green energy initiative. I believe in investing in the company that made me." He was lying so smoothly he probably believed it himself. In his mind, the $85 million was already his. He had forgotten about the theft. He had forgotten about the forgery. He only saw the vice president title he was sure to receive tonight. A few feet away, my sister Chantel was putting on a performance of her own. She was wearing a dress made of gold sequins that hugged her body like a second skin. It was loud. It was flashy. It was exactly the kind of thing you wear when you want everyone to know you have money, but you have no taste. She was holding her phone up the ring light attached to the case, blinding anyone who looked directly at her. She was live streaming to her 50,000 followers. "Hey guys," she cooed at the screen, pouting her lips. "I am here at the charity gala. It is so beautiful. But honestly, my heart is heavy tonight. My sister Sasha is going through a really mental health crisis. We are all just trying to support her." She paused to read a comment, then looked back at the camera with teary, sincere eyes. "Thank you, user Lisa. Yes, family is everything. Money comes and goes, but loyalty is forever. We are just praying she gets the help she needs. We are paying for the best doctors, because that is what family does. We protect each other." She ended the stream and instantly snapped at a passing waiter. "More champagne. Now." Byron walked over to her, checking his watch. "Where is Hunter?" he hissed. "He should be here. I want him to meet the board members before the announcement." "He is parking the Porsche," Chantel said, sipping her drink. "He said he had to make one last call to the Cayman Islands." Byron smiled. "Good, good. By tomorrow morning that money will be so deep offshore that Sasha won't be able to find it with a submarine." Suddenly the house lights dimmed. The murmurs in the room died down. A hush fell over the crowd. A single bright spotlight cut through the darkness and illuminated the stage. The CEO of OmniCorp, a man named Mr. Henderson, walked to the microphone. Byron straightened his tie. He puffed out his chest. He was convinced that this was the moment he would be called up. He prepared his humble face. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Henderson said, his voice booming through the speakers. "Tonight is a night of history. We usually reserve this gala to celebrate our past. But tonight, we are here to celebrate our future." Byron took a step forward, ready to walk. "We have faced a hostile takeover attempt this quarter," Mr. Henderson continued. "But we have been saved. Not by a bank, not by a government bailout, but by the return of a legacy we thought was lost." Byron froze. That did not sound right. "Please welcome Mr. Henderson," said, gesturing to the curtain. "Our newest strategic partner, the holder of the Genesis shares, and the new majority owner of the OmniCorp Voting Trust." Byron's glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered on the floor, but nobody heard it, because the curtain was rising. The heavy velvet curtains parted slowly, revealing the stage that my father believed was set for him. But as the golden spotlight cut through the darkness, it did not land on a generic corporate backdrop. It landed on me. I stepped forward. I was not wearing the beige cardigan from the bank. I was not wearing the sensible flats from the museum. I was wearing midnight blue silk, a gown structured like armor, with sharp shoulders and a neckline that plunged just enough to show the skin I had stopped hiding. It was haute couture, the kind of dress that does not have a price tag, because it is not sold in stores. It was the kind of dress that whispered power rather than screaming for attention. Beside me stood Mr. Henderson, the CEO of OmniCorp. He did not introduce me as a guest. He did not treat me like a charity case. He offered me his arm. It was a gesture of respect, of partnership. I placed my hand on his sleeve, feeling the expensive wool of his tuxedo, and we walked toward the center of the stage together. The ballroom, which had been buzzing with the low hum of gossip and networking, fell into a silence so sudden it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I scanned the crowd. I saw them immediately. They were in the front row, of course. Byron always insisted on the front row. My father was frozen mid-clap. His hands were separated, poised to applaud his own imaginary promotion. His mouth was slightly open, a smile of anticipation dying a slow, agonizing death on his lips. He blinked. He squinted against the stage lights. He did not recognize me at first. In his mind, his daughter was a mouse. He could not process the lioness standing 10 feet above him. Then he saw my eyes. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a curtain falling. His hands went limp. The crystal flute of champagne he was holding slipped from his fingers. It hit the marble floor. The sound was incredibly loud in the silent room. Shattering glass, a splash of expensive vintage liquid soaking into his polished shoes. But Byron did not look down. He could not look away from me. He looked like a man seeing a ghost wearing a $50,000 dress. Next to him, Hunter was not looking at my face. He was looking at my chest. Specifically at the left lapel of my gown. Pinned there, catching the light with a cold blue fire, was the North Star brooch. It was a cluster of diamonds surrounding a massive sapphire. It was the one thing Grandpa Joe had kept from his mother. It was the family heirloom that Byron had claimed was lost years ago. He had told everyone it was stolen. In reality, Grandpa had hidden it in the iron box waiting for the worthy successor. Hunter knew what that brooch meant. It was not just jewelry. It was the crown. It was the symbol of the head of the family. I saw Hunter's throat bob as he swallowed. He took a step back, bumping into Chantel. Chantel was too busy trying to fix her ring light to notice, but when she finally looked up, her phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the table. I let the moment stretch. I let them suffer in the confusion. I let the board members whisper, "Who is she? Is that Byron's daughter? Why is she with the CEO?" Mr. Henderson led me to the podium. He adjusted the microphone for me. He stepped back, ceding the floor. I placed my hands on the lectern. My grip was firm. My nails were painted a deep blood red. I leaned forward. The microphone picked up the sound of my breath. It echoed through the massive speakers surrounding my family with my presence. I looked down. I locked eyes with Byron. He was trembling now. He looked old. He looked small. He looked like exactly what he was, a thief who had been caught. I did not smile. I did not wave. I simply stared at him until he was forced to look down at the broken glass at his feet. Then I spoke. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice smooth and dangerous as velvet. "My name is Sasha Williams, and I am here to correct a few errors in the company ledger. My father always taught me that reputation is everything. He spent 30 years building a facade of respectability, polishing it until it shone like the marble floors he was currently standing on. He thought he was untouchable. He thought the glass ceiling protected him. But he forgot that I was the one holding the hammer." I gestured to the technician in the booth. The lights in the ballroom dimmed further. The massive 500-inch screen behind me, which usually displayed quarterly earnings and boring pie charts, flickered to life. It did not show a graph. It showed a video file. The audio boomed through the surround sound speakers, crisp and undeniable. It was the interior of a coffee shop. The camera angle was low, looking up from a table, capturing Hunter's face in high definition. The entire room heard Hunter's voice, arrogant and smug. "It does not matter if Joe is sane. It matters that I have the money to buy the gavel. In this town, justice is just another commodity. You buy it like you buy groceries." A collective gasp swept through the room. It sounded like all the oxygen being sucked out at once. Hunter's face on the screen was twisted in a sneer. Hunter's face in the audience went white. He clawed at his necktie as if it were strangling him. I did not stop there. The image on the screen changed. It was now a slideshow of documents. Checks, hundreds of them. "These are pension checks issued to Joseph Williams," I said, my voice cutting through the shock. "And these are the deposit slips putting them into the personal account of Byron Williams. The handwriting experts have already confirmed the forgeries." Byron let out a strangled cry. "That is a lie," he shouted, his voice cracking. "She is lying. Turn it off." He lunged toward the stage, but 2 security guards blocked his path. He stood there shaking, surrounded by the peers he had tried so hard to impress. I turned to the CEO, Mr. Henderson, who looked horrified. "Mr. Henderson," I said, leaning into the microphone, "as the holder of the Genesis Class A shares and the majority vote in the shareholder trust, I find that I cannot align myself with a company that employs thieves." I looked down at Byron. "I am formally submitting a motion of no confidence in your Human Resources Director. I demand the immediate termination of Byron Williams for cause, effective right now." Mr. Henderson did not hesitate. He walked to the microphone. "Motion seconded and carried," he said. "Byron Williams, you are relieved of your duties. Please surrender your badge." Byron collapsed. He physically crumpled his knees, hitting the floor amidst the shards of his broken champagne glass. He looked up at me, mouthing the word, "Why?" I did not answer him. I turned my gaze to Hunter. He was trying to back away, trying to blend into the crowd, but people were parting around him like he was diseased. "And Hunter," I said. My voice was softer now, almost conversational. "You told me that my grandfather's money needed to be managed by a professional. You were right, so 5 minutes ago my new financial team executed a clawback clause in the OmniCorp vendor agreement." Hunter froze. "We withdrew 100% of the bank's capital from your hedge fund," I continued. "Without our liquidity, your margin calls just triggered automatically. I checked the market data before I walked out here. Your fund is insolvent. You are not just fired, Hunter. You are bankrupt." Hunter let out a scream of pure rage. "You bitch!" he yelled, lunging forward. "You ruined me." "Security," I said calmly. 4 large men descended on them. They grabbed Byron by his tuxedo jacket and Hunter by his arms. They did not drag them out gently. They hauled them backward, their expensive shoes dragging on the floor. The room erupted in flashes as press photographers who had been waiting for a puff piece realized they were witnessing the scandal of the decade. And then there was Chantel. My sister had been standing near the dessert table. When the video played, she had dropped her phone. Now, seeing her father and husband being dragged away like common criminals, she panicked. She looked at me, then at the crowd. She saw the photographers turning their lenses toward her. She hiked up her gold sequin dress and ran. She did not run to help her father. She ran toward the ladies' room. She slammed the door shut, locking herself in a stall. But the press was relentless. They crowded outside the bathroom door, shouting questions, their flashes illuminating the crack under the door. She was trapped in a gilded cage of her own making, hiding in a toilet stall while the empire she loved burned to the ground. I stood on the stage watching them go. I felt Mr. Henderson place a hand on my shoulder. The ballroom broke into applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was the thunderous sound of people who love a winner. I had come to collect a debt, and the account was finally settled. It took exactly 30 days for the kingdom of Oak Street to crumble into dust. The bank did not waste time. Since Byron had used the house as collateral for the high-risk loans Hunter had advised him to take, the foreclosure was immediate and absolute. I drove past the mansion on the 1st of the month. The white pillars that my father loved so much were covered in auction notices. The manicured lawn where he had banned me from parking my old Honda was overgrown and littered with the debris of a hasty eviction. It was no longer a fortress. It was just an empty shell stripped of its pretension. Hunter did not even get the dignity of a trial. The audio recording I played at the gala was so damning, so specific in its admission of bribery and fraud that his own lawyers resigned the next morning. The FBI seized everything: his Porsche, his watch collection, his blind trusts in the Caymans. He is currently awaiting sentencing in a federal detention center. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he spends his time trying to give financial advice to the other inmates, but nobody is listening to a man who bet against his own family and lost. Chantel learned the hardest lesson of all. She learned that internet fame is not currency. When the scandal broke, her followers did not rally behind her. They turned on her. They called her a fraud. She lost her brand deals. She lost her audience. And with Hunter's assets frozen, she lost her lifestyle. I saw her yesterday. I was stopped at a red light outside a diner on the edge of town. Through the grease-stained window, I saw a woman in a polyester apron refilling ketchup bottles. She looked exhausted. Her makeup was smudged. She was not filming a brunch vlog. She was serving eggs to a truck driver who did not care about her skincare routine. She looked up and saw my car. For a second, our eyes met. She did not sneer. She did not laugh. She just looked down and went back to wiping the table. But the most poetic justice was reserved for my father, Byron Williams. The man who believed he was too good to sit on a plastic chair was now a pariah. No company would hire him. His country club membership was revoked. His friends pretended they never knew him. I saw him near the park downtown a few blocks from the homeless shelter. He was wearing the tuxedo pants from the gala, but they were stained with mud and ripped at the hem. He was standing near a bus stop shivering in the autumn wind. He saw my car approaching. He recognized the silhouette of the new luxury sedan I had bought. He took a step forward. I slowed down. I saw his mouth open. I saw the desperate, hungry look in his eyes. He wanted to beg. He wanted to play the father card one last time. But then he saw my face through the glass. I was not looking at him with anger. I was looking at him with absolute indifference. I looked at him the way you look at a stranger. He stopped. The shame finally hit him. He realized that the bridge was not just burned, it was vaporized. He slumped back onto the bench. As the wind picked up, he reached into the trash can next to him. He pulled out a stack of discarded newspapers. He unfolded them with shaking hands and stuffed them into his jacket for insulation. He wrapped the old, dirty newsprint around his chest to keep warm. Trash belongs with trash. That is what he had said to me at my wedding. And now as he huddled under the garbage he used to despise, he finally understood the weight of his own words. I did not roll down the window. I did not offer him $1. I pressed the accelerator and drove away, leaving him in the rearview mirror. I had one more stop to make, the most important stop of my life. I pulled up to the entrance of the nursing home where they had locked Grandpa Joe away. I walked up to the reception desk, slapped the transfer order on the counter, and smiled. I am here to check out Joseph Williams. He is going home. It has been 6 months since the gala. I am standing on the porch of 742 Oak Street. It does not look like my father's house anymore. The imposing iron gates are gone, replaced by a welcoming archway. The white pillars are no longer cold sentinels of exclusion. They are wrapped in ivy. There is a bronze plaque near the door. It reads, "The Joseph Williams Center for African American History." I bought the house at the foreclosure auction. I paid cash. I did not buy it to live in. I bought it to rewrite the story of what happened here. Inside the sunroom where Chantel used to film her vapid videos is now a reading library for local students. The dining room where Byron held court is now a gallery showcasing local art. The house is full of life. It is full of noise. It is full of the truth that my family tried so hard to erase. I walk through the main hall. The floors are the same, but the air is lighter. I make my way to the central exhibit. It is a single pedestal lit by a soft spotlight. Resting on top of it, encased in 3 inches of bulletproof glass, is a small gray object. It is tattered. It is water-damaged. The cover is stained with the faint ghost of cocktail sauce. It is the passbook. The same passbook my father threw in the trash. The same passbook Hunter laughed at. Now it sits on a velvet cushion guarded by motion sensors and a security team that answers only to me. A brass plate underneath it reads, "The Foundation." Visitors stop and stare at it. They whisper about the fortune it held. But to me, it is not about the $85 million. It is a reminder that value is not always visible to the naked eye. It is a monument to the man who saved it when everyone else wanted to throw it away. I hear the hum of a motorized wheelchair behind me. I turn around. Grandpa Joe is smiling. He is wearing a sharp new suit tailored to fit his frail frame. He looks healthier than he has in years. His eyes are clear today. The best doctors in the country have adjusted his medication, and while his memory still drifts like a boat on a foggy lake, he knows where he is. He knows he is safe. I walk over and take his hand. His skin is paper thin, but his grip is warm. "We did it, Grandpa," I whisper. "We took it back." He looks at the passbook in the glass case. He chuckles a dry, raspy sound that fills my heart. "They thought it was garbage," he says, his voice surprisingly strong. "They only saw the dirt. They never looked at the ink." I crouch down beside him. I am not the invisible archivist anymore. I am the keeper of the flame. I am the woman who turned a discarded legacy into a fortress of culture and education. "Are you ready to go to the garden?" I ask. "I planted those hydrangeas you like." Grandpa Joe nods. He pats my cheek. "You are a good girl, Sasha. You know the difference between price and value." I stand up and move behind his wheelchair. I push him slowly toward the back doors out into the sunshine that floods the garden. The air smells of fresh earth and blooming flowers, not fear and pretension. As we roll down the ramp, I look back one last time at the passbook sitting in its cage of light. My father is sleeping under newspapers in a park. My brother-in-law is in a cell. My sister is serving tables. They are all exactly where they belong. And so are we. I smile as I push my grandfather into the light. Trash belongs with trash, my father had said. He was right. But he forgot the most important part of the equation. One man's trash is another woman's empire, and I am just getting started building mine. This story is a powerful reminder that true worth is never found on the surface. Sasha's family was blinded by their arrogance and obsession with status, causing them to discard the most valuable thing they possessed. They underestimated the quiet power of history and the resilience of the person they deemed the weakest. We must learn to look beyond appearances and value the people who truly love us, rather than chasing the validation of those who only care about what we can give them. When you stay true to your integrity, even the trash thrown at you can become the foundation of your success. If you have ever been underestimated by the people closest to you, or if you believe that integrity eventually wins over greed, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that their current struggle is just the prequel to their victory. Thank you for watching, and remember, never let anyone else determine your value.